Hello and welcome, my name is Redboot, and this is a playthrough of Pendragon, the Fall of Rome and Britain, designed by Marc Gouyon-Rety from the Coin series, published by GMT Games and originally designed by Volker Runke. So we are moving towards the first epoch, and we might hit that today. I'm going to try to sort of step it up in terms of the number of cards that I get to. So this video series doesn't run for too long, but there are a couple things that I need to clean up before moving on. First of all, I've done a quick count, and I've got total prosperity at 52, but it actually is at 50. And so I'm going to move that down because I did a count, and prosperity plus prestige for the dukes go to 52. In addition to that, I did a count of population, and the population under Britain control at the moment is not at 34, but is actually at 36. So I'm going to move that back up here. So that is actually at the winning level. So it'll be interesting to see what happens at the epoch. And then a couple of errors, small ones, thankfully. One thing I did in the last video that was pointed out by Light Lamp Dog was that I did a feat without doing a command. And yeah, I probably shouldn't have done that. I don't know that I needed to move a piece, but I certainly should have paid the 2 resources. So I'm going to go ahead and penalize myself those 2 resources. In addition to that, when I made up for a mistake in the last video, I should have given myself back 2 resources. Instead, I only gave myself one resource. So the net of that is to move the Britain resources down from 4 to 3. And I think that's pretty much it. Some other people might come up with some other things. One thing that the designer, Marc, pointed out was that in Parisi, there is no control, and therefore the road from Eberacum south is cut. I actually violated that cut at one point in the game. I'm not going to go back and fix it at this point, but that's something that we need to remember, that until Parisi comes back under control, there's no movement from the Yorkshire area down into the southern part of the island. And so we move on to the cards. The eligible factions right now are the Civitates and the Scotti. So the Civitates have the option at this point to take the Lindsay card, and I think I'm actually going to take it. What it says is place Saxon Federati in Parisi or Corioltavi, 3 warbands, and if none there, 1 settlement, and that will give me an opportunity to control Parisi. So with Parisi blanked out at the moment and the roads cut from north to south, as I mentioned before, I think that's actually a pretty good card. So let's go ahead and take the card. So we'll place a settlement at the Hillfort space in Darwentio, and we'll put in 3 Federati covered with the blue to indicate that they are in fact blue Federati, and we'll also put the blue Federati on the settlement itself. So that brings the Parisi region back under control, even though it has no prosperity and only a population of 1 at this point. That road could become more important a little bit later in the game. So with that, we'll move the eligible factions, move the Civitates to event, and that means that the Scotti can go with a command and feat. So I've determined that the Scotti are going to raid. They obviously can't take the Lindsay event. They're not going to defer and pass for the Vortigern event because it's not a shield event. So as you work your way down the bot flowchart, they are going to raid once again. I did not roll enough. I rolled too high a roll for them to actually do a return. So they are going to raid. So let's see how that works out. So having consulted the bots, the raids are going to be in Text-Awarity and Decangli, where there is the least difference between population and troop presence for the Dooks. And then, because I rolled a 2, there will only be those two 2d4 raids, and then there's going to be a 1d4 raid in Wotadini, up north, and this place here, Karwaitii. And that because that is where the most cubes are available for plunder. So one of the recommendations that Marc made in the last video was that I do one at a time instead of doing all 4 at the same time. And I think that'll be a little bit less confusing in general, and also it has some advantages in terms of, if you run out of pieces and so forth, you can use pieces disposed of in the first raid to fund, if you will, the second raid. So we're going to go in around the island, and we're going to start in Decangli. So the first thing we'll do is we'll roll 2d4 to see how many raiders will pop up. And it's going to be 5 raiders in Decangli. So 5 raiders here along the coast, and they will take 2 plunder as their first action, limited by the population as they are. And I should point out that this is going to be accompanied by a ransom feat, since there doesn't look like there is a higher priority target inland. Kornoi is a possibility, but it doesn't have more prosperity tokens. Somebody can correct me on that. I'm not sure if the number of troops in the region makes a difference. So I'm going to go ahead and raid Decangli, not do a deep raid into Kornoi, and therefore do a ransom command as my next as my feat. So the next question is, will the Decangli Scotti Raiders battle? And I think the answer is no, because if I think if those were militia around the fort, they might, but since they are Dook's cavalry, they're going to do 4 damage, and that's not going to be enough to assure a taking of the fort after the escalade phase, because in the escalade phase, of course, they also get the benefit of the fort, so they would wipe out the full force before the fort could be taken. So I do not believe that a battle is going to be taking place in Decangli. And so we will simply run the ransom, see if they're successful in ransoming, and they roll a 3, which means they're not. They have to roll a 4 to 6 in order to successfully ransom. So that means that the raid in Decangli is complete. So the prosperity falls by another 2. So we move prosperity down to 48 and prosperity plus prestige to 50. So next, let's see what happens in Text-Awarity, where there is already a raider clan full of plunder waiting for their brethren to come in off the coast. So this is a 2d4 raid. Let's see how many raiders come in. And it's going to be a 4 and a 2, which is 6. No subtraction. So 6 raiders will come into Text-Awarity, and they will take 2 plunder. And the next question is going to be whether or not there are 2 plunder available. The next question is going to be whether or not they will battle. Now there are 9 raiders now in Text-Awarity and 3 cavalry in the Dook's fort. So in this case, it appears once again that although there are quite a few raiders, because there are 3 cavalry guarding the fort, it looks like there's not going to be a battle. And the reason for that is if you look at the possible withdrawal into the fort of the cavalry, on the escalade step, the 3 cavalry plus the 1 garrison unit would take out 8 of the raiders, because a fort has a modifier of 1 in escalade defense, and the raiders do 1 damage in escalade defense. So they would kill 8 of the 9 raiders, and then there would not be enough raiders left in order to assault effectively on the assault phase. So there will be no battle in Textuarity. So let's see if the raiders can at least get away with some ransom, and they do. They roll a 5. So that means that 1 Britain resource is spent to go down to 2 in ransom, and Scotti Renown goes up to 12. And next we'll take a look at what happens in Wotadini. Now in Wotadini we just have a 1 die 4 attack, that's why the pawn is gray. So there will certainly not be a battle in Wotadini. There's just going to be plunder taken. And only 1 raider comes into Wotadini. So we'll take 1 raider, put him off the coast, and take 1 plunder, put it on top of him. And obviously there would be no battle because there are 4 militia in Wotadini. So we move on to the last raid, which is in Karwaitii. Karwaitii down here. And there are 4 Dukes cavalry in the fort there, so I think the chances of there being a battle in Karwaitii are pretty slim. More than likely they're going to come and take what plunder they can. Oh, and we need to do a ransom in Wotadini, so we'll do that in just a moment. Yes, so first of all, let's do the ransom in Wotadini, and they roll a 1, so there's no successful ransom. And then we will go ahead and roll the 1d4 to see what happens with the plunder. And 1 additional raider comes into Karwaitii. So we'll put that 1 raider out, and we'll give him the last plunder available in Karwaitii. And let's roll for ransom in Karwaitii. And the ransom die roll in Karwaitii is a 6, which is successful. And that means that Scotti Renown will go up by 1 to 13, whereas Britain resources will go down 1 to 1. And that looks like that's it for the Scotti raid. There are an awful lot of Scotti raiders on the board right now, which bodes well for potential settlement later. Looks like there are 8 Scotti raiders available, which means there are 22 on the board. So let's go ahead and move the Civitates and the Scotti to ineligible, and move the Dukes and Saxons back up to eligible. And we're ready to move on to the next card. So we'll place the Vortigern card as the next card, and we'll flip over. Magnus Maximus, the Epoch card. So we've ended the first Epoch. So what we do in this case is we actually switch the Vortigern card to become the first card after the Epoch, and the Epoch goes immediately. And this is going to be interesting because I believe as part of the end of round play in the Epoch round, the Scotti will get to go back to Ireland or Scotland and with their plunder without any possibility of actually catching them in an intercept. So that is actually not good. And one thing I forgot to do before we move too much further is I need to adjust the Dukes, the prosperity, because 1 plunder was taken in Karwaitii, 1 in Wotadini, and 2 were taken in Textuarity, so there was an additional 4 plunder that was taken. And that additional plunder means that total prosperity goes down from 48 to 44, and prosperity plus prestige goes down to 46. Now, let's move forward with the Epoch phase. So the first thing we do in the Epoch round is the Annona, and we just got Federati on the board, and I'm going to pay for them to stay. I have to confess I'm not 100% sure I understand reading the rules how the Annona phase works, but One thing I can tell is that we need to pay one resource, either Dux or Britain resource, in order to bribe the Federati to stay in Parisi, and so that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to reduce the Dux, and hopefully I got this right, reduce the Dux by 2 resources, and reduce the Civitates by 1 resource, which is all they have left, in order to place 3 plunder on the board in Parisi on the Federati. And then those Federati will immediately cash those in, which grows 3 renown, 1, 2, 3, for the Saxon player. And because I paid everybody off in Parisi, there's no additional plunder taken, not that there's any to take anyway, and they stay Federati. So that's the Annona phase. The next phase is the hoarding in the Imperium phase. Civitates may transfer Britain resources up to half of the number of towns on the map, but unfortunately there are no Britain resources available at this point. They've all been spent down, and so there's no hoarding that will take place and no Civitates wealth that will be accumulated during this Imperium phase. So now we move the Imperium track, and as we can see, prosperity plus prestige is at 46, which means it's at 55 or less. So we're going to shift the Imperium track down from Roman rule to autonomy. Still at military dominance, but wealth does not exceed prestige, and therefore there's no shift to civilian dominance. Now the last thing we do is we divide prestige and wealth by 2. So prestige will go down to 1 from 2. Whoops, that's resources. Dux prestige down to 1. And prosperity plus prestige moves down 1 as well, from 46 down to 45. Now taking a look at the victory possibilities, which is the next step in the epoch phase, we see there is no victory because at autonomy, the prosperity plus prestige for the Dux needs to be 60 or higher, and it's at 45. Interestingly, the Civitates at autonomy needs to be at 27 or higher, and it is at 36, but they have to hold civilian dominance, and they do not hold civilian dominance at this point. So they came fairly close to victory on this term, but they did not quite get it. The Scotti need 45 renown and 4 settlements in order to win, so they're not even close to victory. And the Saxons need either 30 renown and 4 settlements or 10 control, and they have neither as well. So there is no victory at this point, and so we move on. And in moving on, we look to the card. The next thing we do is we resolve the Epoch card, and this is a card that simulates the removal of troops from England to go into Gaul under the command of Magnus Maximus during the earlier period when this game in the 4th century is being played, the late 4th century. And I'm allowed to spend, the Dux is allowed to spend 3 resources to remove cavalry, and then pay resources in order to remove cavalry and gain prestige, and possibly a fair amount of Britain resources. Unfortunately, the Dux are too poor to even bid 1 cavalry. They only have 2 resources, and they need 3 resources to remove cavalry. So what's going to happen here is what's at the bottom is if there's no action and no cavalry are removed, prestige is dropped by 8. So that's pretty damaging. Unfortunately, or fortunately, prestige is only 1 at this point, so it can only drop 1. So Dux prestige is going to drop by 1, and prosperity but plus prestige is also going to drop by 1 to 44. Now, one of the things that I find interesting and sort of necessary to do is once we determine that there's no victory, I like to kind of see where we're at. So I'm going to put up a quick spreadsheet here on where we're at in the game and just have a few minutes to sort of take stock of where we are so we can do some strategizing going forward. Okay, so we're back, and we go to the revenue phase next. And Duke's revenue is actually, prestige goes up by 2, because that's what happens under Roman rule or autonomy. So we'll put that up here. And we'll increase prosperity plus prestige up to 46. So the next thing we do is the Civitatis revenue, and Civitatis revenue goes up by prosperity under Britain control, which currently is at 43, plus the total number of towns or hill forts on the map, and towns is more favorable. There are 12, so there will be an addition of 55 Civitatis revenue to move up. So Civitatis revenue, resources moves from 0 up to 55. Finally, Saxon renown and Scotti renown go up by prosperity under their control, but currently neither has prosperity under their control, and so there's no adjustment there. So now we go to the upkeep phase. So first of all, the Dukes will pay 10 resources for their forts. And then they are also going to choose to keep their roads maintained. And so they will pay 10 resources to maintain their roads, moving the resources down to 35. Now the next thing we do is we relocate cavalry. Any cavalry that's not in a fort space, which includes Durotriges at this point is the only place, must relocate its cavalry to a fort space. So I'm going to move the cavalry in Durotriges up to Corioltavi. I don't have to remove anywhere else, any other cavalry, if I don't choose to, because the rules say that anything that's already in a fort doesn't need to be transferred, but I am going to move one Dukes cavalry from Karwatii to Textawerdi, which I may do if I choose to, because there are so many. In fact, I'm going to do that with 2 cavalry, because there are so many raiders in Textawerdi. My hope is to wipe them out on the next turn. Next, there is a repatriation of militia. So if you have 3 or more militia in a space, you need to remove 1/3 of that militia, rounded down. So we're going to remove a militia in Wotadini, and we're going to remove a militia in Atrabates, and we'll put those into the available forces. Next, half of our refugees are lost. That's part of the bookkeeping of the epoch phase, the ugly bookkeeping, so we'll put that back in, and we have 1 refugee that can be repatriated at a later round. So the next thing that happens here is that the Saxons and the Scotti do a return command, which is going to be painful because I said actually that I was hoping to wipe them out. I had forgotten, although I mentioned it earlier, that they actually do a return command, and so there's not going to be an opportunity to wipe them out. So in all of these spaces with Scotti raiders, there are no Saxon raiders on the board at the moment. All of their plunder, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 will be converted to renown, moving their renown up from 13 to 23. And all of the raiders will return home. So that's ill timing for the Dukes and the Civitates. All right, we're getting down to the end of the epoch round, and one of the last things we do is we add prosperity equal to population in all regions. But since we are under autonomy, I can only do that in the bottom row. I can't add anything to the top row. So let me go ahead and do that off camera, and we'll come back in a moment. So I have added 10 prosperity to the board and moved total prosperity plus prestige up to 54 and 56. And now we reset eligibility for all parties. And that should be the end of the epoch phase. So let's move on to the next card, which is, as we know, the Vortigern card. So we'll move that over to the next card, and we'll turn over the Cuneda card. And let's see what happens next. So the Saxons go first on the Vortigern card, and it's a good card for them. So they will take it. It's a shield card. They have no possibility of doing a return command because they have nothing on the board, so they are going to take the card. And the card says, remove all but 2 Briton troops from Contiaki, place a Saxon settlement and 6 warbands at Contiaki's hill fort site in Rutupii. So this is actually pretty devastating for the Dukes and the Civitates, because the fort at Contiaki is one of the key forts, in fact the key fort, because it sits on the Oceanus Germanicus and the Oceanus Britannicus, and therefore contributes to subtraction in both of those fronts. So it says remove all but 2 Briton troops, and there are only 2 Briton troops, so I'm going to move the cavalry over here to the town. I'm going to take out the fort and put it up in the available forts space up at the top of the board. And then we take 6 war bands plus a settlement, and we put them here in Contiaki, in the landing of Vortigern. Once again, a fairly devastating development for the Civitate and the Dukes. So that's it for the Saxon turn, and now we move to the Scotti turn. Scotti are next in the Vortigern card. So let's go ahead and make the adjustment up here. The Saxons went first and took the event. Scotti, of course, can take a command plus a feat, and my guess is they're probably going to end up doing a raid. Okay, so for this Scotti raid, I've figured out which of the 4 regions are being raided. I rolled a 6, and therefore I'm not rolling a limited number of regions with 2d4. All regions are going to be 2d4, and are focusing on regions with 2+ prosperity. The first region that I'm choosing is Silures, and because there is a higher priority target inland, which is Cornowii, we're actually, because there is the ability to get 4 plunder, there's the ability to take 2 plunder for 2 population, and there are fewer troops. So for all intents and purposes, that's a more attractive region. So we are going to do a deep raid as part of our surprise in Cornowii, and that'll be the first time I think this game. So first, let's see how many raiders are going to raid into Cornowii, and it is 5. So we'll place 5 raiders in Cornowii, and they will take 2 plunder. So in this case, we are going to do a battle. There are 5 raiders versus 1 militia, and there is the possibility even of a coup de main and a successful coup de main. So we are going to roll for the coup de main to see if that's successful and move from there. The militia will withdraw into the fort, so there will be no field battle. So this is a town which has a capacity of 4. There is 1 unit withdrawn inside it. So I need to roll less than or equal to a 3 in order to have a successful coup de main. So let's take that roll. So I'll roll a 1d6, and I got a 3. So we have a successful coup de main, which means that we skip the escalade step and move right to the assault. So the militia plus the garrison unit in the town, and in fact I think there might be 2 garrison units in the town, now that I think of it, there are, they will do 3 damage to the raiders, and the 5 raiders will do 5 damage to the town plus militia. So that will eliminate town, and that will eliminate the militia, leaving 2 raiders in control. So I'll take out the Briton control. I'll take off the Briton control. They're not in control because they're raiders, but they do eliminate Briton control of Cornowii. So we'll do our bookkeeping. Having taken 2 plunder, total prosperity goes to 52. Prosperity plus prestige falls to 54. And having taken control, or removed Britain control, of a 2 population province, Britain control is going to move down from 36 to 34. I should also change the victory levels. I've forgotten to do that. This pawn should actually no longer be on 36, it should be on 27. And the red pawn on 75 should now be moved up to 60. which is the new level under autonomy. So we move on to the next raid, which is in Ordowices. Ordowices is also a 2-4 attack raid, and they will move in with a whopping 7 raiders. So we'll move 7 raiders into Ordowices. Three, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and they will take 1 plunder, which is the limit because of the population. And it should be pretty obvious that they will do battle. I think 7 is well more than enough to overwhelm the militia and the hill fort at Saguntium. So the militia will withdraw into Saguntium, and the Scotti will attack Saguntium, and in the escalade step, the militia will take out 2, 1 for the militia and 1 for the garrison, and then in the assault phase, they'll take out another 2 and be eliminated themselves. Leaving the Scotti in nominal control, not full control, of Ordowices. They plunder the hill fort there, so they take another plunder. So prosperity plus prestige and prosperity are going to fall by 2. So let's take care of that. Total prosperity down to 50, prosperity plus prestige down to 52. And then because we lost control of a region with 1 population, Britain control moves down from 34 to 33. So far things have been pretty successful for the Scotti raiders. Let's see what happens at the next region, which is Decangli. And in Decangli we roll for 6 raiders. So 6 Scotti raiders in a region with 2 population will take 2 plunder, and there will be no battle in Decangli because there are 2 inherent units and 2 Dux cavalry units guarding the fort there, and there's really no chance for the Scotti raiders to take that fort. So we will simply go up to total prosperity plus prestige and prosperity, and we'll move those down by 2. And finally we'll have a raid in Wotadini. Once again a 2-4 raid, and we roll 5 raiders into Wotadini. So 5 Scotti raiders will move into Wotadini, and we'll take 2 plunder, moving total prosperity to 46 and prosperity plus prestige to 48. Now in this case we have an interesting situation as to whether or not there will be a battle. There are 2 hill forts and 3 militia. So 1 militia will withdraw into 1 hill fort, 2 militia will withdraw into the other hill fort. I'll just put those there. The Scotti would end up attacking the hill fort with the fewest militia, and in the escalade step would suffer 2 hits and would inflict 2 and suffer 2 in the assault step. So actually there will be a battle. The Scotti will be left with a single raider with plunder. 4 raiders will be destroyed. And I'm making a mess of this. And the hill fort at Wotadini will be taken out by the Scotti raiders. But that will not affect control because there are still 2 militia and and a hill fort in Wotadini. However, it does result in... Oh, we already took out the prosperity plus prestige and prosperity. So that's it for now. I think that's the last of the raids for the Scotti. So we're going to move the Scotti and the Saxons down to ineligible, which makes the Dux and the Civitates eligible. And let's take a look at the next card. So the Cuneta card is next, and so we'll move that to the discard pile, and we'll play Anirin as the next card. So the Dux are up first, and let's take a look at the card. Now, in light of what just happened on this last turn, it's sort of an interesting card. It's Wotadini Warlord moves to Gwynedd, which means which says remove one hill fort and 2 Civitates units from Wotadini, which we have, and move one hill and place 1 hill fort and 4 Civitates units in Ordowices, which is a net increase of 2 Civitates units, which on its face is pretty good. However, I think there's not much question at this point that the Dux really need to do an intercept and get rid of these Scotti Raiders and keep them from bringing their plunder back and scoring more renown, because right now this is looking a little bit bleak, I would say, for the Dux and the Civitates. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to spend 2 resources in Karwaitii, and I'll take those off of the Britain resources. I'm going to spend 2 resources in Solures, taking Britain resources down to 31. And finally, I'm going to spend 2 resources in Textawerity, moving Britain resources down to 29. So with Textawerity, I'm going to move 1 cavalry up to Wotadini. In Karwaitii, I'm going to move 1 cavalry down to Dekangli to join up with the cavalry that's already there. And in Solures, I'm going to move 1 cavalry up to Kornowii. Now, let's take a look at the battle situation in all 3 of the regions that I just moved into. Starting with Kornowii, I have 1 cavalry and 2 raiders in a clear space. So I believe that according to the non-player tactics, the raiders in clear terrain are going to attempt to evade, which is very difficult because they have to roll a 6. And they roll a 5. So they will be wiped out along with their plunder. Back they go. Now in Dekangli, it's the same situation, just with a larger number of troops. We have 3 Dux and 5 Scotti Raiders. And the Scotti are going to attempt to evade, and they roll a 3 and are unsuccessful. So we'll take out these 2 plunder and move the 5 Scotti Raiders. Now I just realized I made a mistake once again, but I'll correct it right away this time. The Karnowii Raiders are in uncontrolled territory, and so I cannot move my cavalry from Solures into Kornowii to do an intercept. So I'm going to give myself back those 2 resources and give them back the 2 plunder. And then finally, up in Wotadini, I moved a cavalry up there to take on that 1 raider. But he is in his home terrain, and therefore will still attempt an evade, but will be able to be successful on a 4 to 6 instead of just a 6 because he's in the hills. So the roll is a 1, and therefore this guy is wiped out. And that is the Dukes phase, and the Dukes won 2 battles, and so their prestige goes up by 2. Now, some bookkeeping. Because there was a town destroyed in, I believe it was in Cornouailles, the prestige falls by 2. So I'll go back to where I started here. And in Decangli, since I won a battle against somebody with 2 plunder, I get to take 1 of that plunder, and I'm going to actually, rather than putting that on the regional prosperity, I'm going to put that on the Dukes and try to gain some Dukes resources at some point. And the Dukes are going to execute a requisition feat in addition to the intercept command. And so for each of 6 spaces with Civitate strongholds, and there are at least 6, I can transfer a Britain resource plus all plunder carried to Dukes resources. So Dukes resources are going to go from 2 up to 8 for the 6. And then I can cash in my plunder in Decangli to move up to 9. And Britain resources will move down 6 from 31 to 25. And that will be the requisition feat. So we'll remove this plunder from Decangli. We'll move the Dukes piece eligibility from down to command plus feat, which enables the Scotti to take the event or a limited command. And I think what the Civitates are going to do is, using their limited command, they're going to use their trade in order to increase revenue. And therefore, they're going to put 1 resource for every town on the board. So that's 11. So they get to move up to 36 resources, and then in 2 spaces with Britain control, they can pay a resource to add prosperity equal to the population, and they are going to do that. So they're going to do that in 2 regions, costing 2 resources, and we'll add 3 prosperity in Atrebates and 2 prosperity in Decangli. And that will move total prosperity up 5 from 46 to 51, and prosperity plus prestige from 51. Actually, I lost prestige, so it goes from 51 to 53. Actually, it goes from 49 to 53. So we move the Scotti and the Saxons to eligible, and the Dukes and Civitates to ineligible. And let's move on to the next card. So we have the Anirim card, which moves to current, and we'll flip over the Shades of Boudica card. And it looks like the Scotti are going to go first. And I'm going to call it here, 4 cards in. We have the Anirim card up next, with the Scotti deciding whether or not they're going to probably either raid or possibly take the card, and the Saxons going next, probably with another raid coming up. And since doing a bunch of raids takes a little bit of time, and this video is running a little over, I think we'll wait and we'll try to accomplish more on the next turn, on the next episode. So thanks for joining me, and we'll see you the next time.